Hey everybody, going to be doing Scream and Jason today, per request. So give me just a second here. I'm going to post this over on the page so everybody can see it and let them know we're live. And posted it on. There we go. Okay. So you guys will get to see all that. And we're going to get this going. You know, I may actually be close to time today. That's a good thing. I know this doesn't look like much right now, but it will here in a moment. I wanted to do this dual face cut. And I wanted to draw this one for a while, but I thought it was too simplistic for the card show. But, you know, as we're coming up on Halloween, I thought I'd do something cool because I'm not doing Inktober and whatnot. And I wanted to do something cool for you guys so that you could get a little bit different change up rather than just typical cartoon stuff, you know, and comic stuff that I grind out. But don't worry, it's not going anywhere. It's still going to be here. You guys are awesome. Like I said, as long as you're hanging out, I'll keep hanging out and doing this. But yeah, I love these series. And as you guys know, I love horror stuff. So I'm just all about this, especially these two. They are two of the top slasher movie types for me, and I'm really, really into those. You know, I was talking with, if you guys saw the thread, I was talking with Scott about this, and I'm not going to go too far into it because I know the kiddies are watching and whatnot, and we don't want to scare the munchkins, so or inform them way before their time of content. So anyway, yeah, the 1980s were prominent in every aspect of pretty much everything, but especially and particularly film. They ran into everything under the R rating at the time, and it was blood, gore, you know, slasher, scare, makeup monsters, you know, whatever content short of select adult acts that just aren't appropriate. They would show murder, you know, hacks, slice, dice, all of it. And the reason was is because prior to that, there was a hardcore censorship on this stuff, and it didn't have a lot of the boundaries that prior decades did. I mean, the 70s did a lot of cool stuff, and there's a lot of movies that nobody knows about that are really phenomenal. But in turn, the 1980s had this weird thing going on. Of course, Scream was from the 90s, of course, and yes, I do know that. But we're talking specifically the Nightmare on Elm Street and you know, Jason series of Friday the 13th, things like that. Those slasher movies that set the standard for Scream were based in free reign, pretty much. I mean, it had a whole different tone and feel to it. It was just beyond belief what they could get away with in those films in comparison to what they have to be restricted to and guidelines driven from now. I mean, it was pretty impressive what they had to do. So, excuse me, I'm adjusting the back of my chair here. I adjusted it earlier and it's too high. But anyway, yeah, this is one of those characters, Jason specifically, is one of those characters that was in that slasher realm. And people just lost their marbles when those limits were removed, and these kind of movies and types of movies came out, and there was no filter for them. They just did whatever came to mind, and it became a racket real quick in the film industry that everybody wanted to see the sequels. And the reason they made so much money is because you didn't know how far they were going to push it, and each film had to raise the bar from the last one, whether it was in gore, whether it was in shock, whether it was in awe, whether it was in thrill, scare, all of it. That was the whole point. And it was are the kills going to be bigger, all that kind of stuff. Because the reason people got excited about it is because they never saw that stuff in person on a common basis. Even though the 1980s were the biggest killing decade since the Civil War, but we're talking civilian murders and mayhem being statistically just off the charts in comparison, by crime rate. But it was a different time. It just was a different time all the way around. And everything in perspective of reflecting the 80s just always added in a different level of scare factor. And I mean, it was just out there, man. I mean, it was like the innocence of the 1950s rolled over into the 80s, and instead of being creeped out by it, the kids were accepting it and wanted to see more of it because they knew, one, they knew it was fiction, and for two, they wanted to bring in a whole new game and level of what they considered the horror movie or the scare, and so on and so forth. And I mean, it escalated, but they even became numb to it for a while, and I think we've dumbed it back down to get a more civilized approach in many ways. But I see a lot of 80s reflected material coming back because of that fact, because people have dumbed it down too much to some people's opinions, and mine included. I'm not for showing kids violence and things like that, and I'm cool with that. But in an adult, in an adult meaning of what is acceptable, they do a lot more impressionism now than actually show the act of it happening. And I'm okay with, moderation for television because kids are still accessible to that stuff, or it's accessible to them more appropriately. But the problem being, on film, we have the option of letting our kids watch that stuff or not. Same thing with Netflix. That's what Netflix understands. And companies like Encore and Stars that are doing things like the new Spartacus series, I would never let my daughter watch that until she's of age. And if she decides to watch it at that point, that's one thing. But I would never expose her to a lot of those series because of the fact of the mature content and the realism, of a lot of that. And that's just one of those things. The same thing has to be portrayed in horror films. It's got to push it up because a lot of it's cheesy now because of the fact that it doesn't have the level of, maximum realism because it's going to be held over. And The Walking Dead has been pushing that limit for years as well and reaching back into those boundaries and then thoroughly hopscotching right over them multiple times. So, it's one of those things where we're redefining those boundaries yet again. And I don't think the film industry is quite ready to go off and, punch the censorship in the face. But I do like the idea that they're reaching out and saying these are the types of things that we need to do for, making better entertainment. It's got to hold a little bit more realism to make it act out and hold up to what it is, especially with the effects we have today. We could do that without harming anyone or using, the chemical boundaries of real-time makeup, and all that good stuff. I'm going to switch over to the 9 here so I don't break up all my 5 for while I'm drawing the other side of this face. But it's just one of those things. We've got to figure out the happy boundary as to understanding of what's entertainment versus what's, too far. And I mean, I don't want to see them do, crazy stuff like harming animals or anything like that. But with CGI these days, we can do pretty much anything we want and make it reasonable for those types of horror movies to come back. And I would really like to see them, because now they're done in small studio phases, because they're the only ones that'll actually step up to them. And, that's why we haven't had a Scream movie in, I think, a decade. I mean, they could have bought in more of a generation gap for that film and had her grow, the lead characters and all that grow up and move on and be grown-up adults and still face the same thing over and over. But did they do that? No, they closed it out right after college and moved on with one more episode, one more closure story, and that was it. And we haven't seen a good one in a while. I mean, even the last, I'm going to switch over here. Even the last Nightmare on Elm Street movie, the one where they showed Freddy's origin, which was a great movie for what it was. It wasn't exactly like the original franchise. It had a close feel, but not exact. I'm a hardcore fan of it, and it kind of was a disappointment and a letdown for exactly what I'm saying right now. It was one of those things where, it just didn't uphold the legacy of the film, and it was a kind of a downer. But it is what it is, made within modern movie standards, because of the fact that they're not allowed to make movies like that anymore, for the most part. I've been inking all day, so I'm heavy-handed. I crush my brushes and my nibs. But, yeah, it's just one of those things where the standards are different, and we need to consider getting back to the basics for these films. And, as adults, we're grown-ups. We can handle it. You know what I mean? Now, any of the young people watching understand this. Do not go watch these films. Do not YouTube them. Do not follow them. Do not get into them yet. Leave that to your parents' discretion. Do not go do any of that. Because if you do, I'm going to rat you out. I'll tell you hands down. If you do, I will come in and tell your parents. I can see through the monitor, and I can tell when you're doing it. So, just so you know. But these films for age-appropriate groups, they need to get back to what they are. You know what I mean? They need to get back to their core. And I know a lot of filmmakers, a lot of younger filmmakers are coming up with studying the 80s films to get back into horror. Because, I mean, the closest thing we've had to a real horror flick series in the last probably 15 years has been the Saw series. You know what I mean? I mean, that's pretty much where we're at. Yeah, that's what I was saying, Alfred. They do a lot of that, pushing those boundaries with The Walking Dead, because of the fact that they know they can. And Kirkman has said all along that it is his homage to the 60s, 70s, and 80s horror movies, that he grew up with. And that's what he wanted to get back to, was the classic horror that scared the bejesus out of everybody in the 50s, because they'd never seen anything like that before. And then you have the 60s stuff where it started to get deeper into the macabre, and zombies came around with Romero and stuff like that. And then you have the 70s stuff, which came up with all the twisted supernatural stuff that anybody could think of, and got an 8mm camera for, and just did. For whatever reason they wanted to make a movie, they made it, and it was practical to do so at the time, so they did. Then you had the 80s come around, where everybody had this culmination of the new movie technology, the better quality film, the better distributors, the better reach, because that was when, you know, the baby boomers had their kids grow up, and that's when we got, you know, the babies of the baby boomers and the grandbabies starting up, um, where we ended up having all these things kick in. And that's one of the things. The populace was there to follow it, and everybody was liberated to follow it, because we were asking for more of that, you know, gore and stuff. And I remember growing up with teenagers around me and hearing them talk about the horror movies and stuff, and it was just crazy. You know, my older cousins and whatnot used to be into all that, and they would talk about it and have discussions and debates and stuff. And I was always the nerdy cousin, so they kept me close because I didn't tell them. You know, I would listen and would hold conversations and such. And because I was interested in pretty much everything pop culture, it was just my thing, especially horror and comics. And they would talk around whatever table they were at or whatever. You know, we'd be out on the back porch or whatever, and talking about that stuff. And it was phenomenal to hear the stories of the movies they would talk about that I wasn't old enough to watch yet. You know, when Nightmare on Elm Street came out, I couldn't watch it. It was in 1984 when it premiered. And, you know, everybody seems to think that it was older than that, or younger than that, but it started showing in independent New Line film release. It started showing in 84, 85. And it didn't get big until 87 when it got its main release. And then there are so many more of those movies that came along right after, back to back, up until the early 90s. And so many people didn't realize that they were growing an occult following for that. Now, that's one of those things where people just don't get it. I do, because I like I said, I was a horror fan from the get-go. And when I was little, my dad used to watch. He used to love horror movies, and he let me watch Night of the Living Dead, and that was the first one that I got hooked on. And I mean, you know, if you've seen Romero's 1960s original release of Night of the Living Dead, it's not, you know, shocking or anything like that as far as a kid could see. You know, I mean, there's nothing, you know, other than the violence itself and the creepiness of it. There's not really a lot that you can, you know, take away a kid's innocence with, but you can give them a good scare. And that's one of those films that got me going in that direction. And in the mid 80s, they had just every kind of gore B movie that was possible out there running amok, and that's what kind of damaged everything too. I mean, it was good that there were so many independent films, but it was so damaging because so many of them were so tongue-in-cheek. You know, you got mainstream box office companies producing all these, you know, studio-based films with this high-end money, expecting to get their own version of these couple of key films, and they didn't make it, i.e. Chuds. If you guys don't know what that is, that was an acronym that stood for it, for the monsters that were in that. I believe Dennis Miller was in one of them. It was pretty bad. I mean, it was camp. Chuds would walk around. They were zombies with consciousness, and they would come around and scream brains, and that's what they wanted. They wanted to eat human brains, and that's what started that mess. And you know, a lot of people say it was Romero's stuff, and I'm not too sure about. You know, I know a lot of his zombies did say brains and things like that, and they kind of made that parody off of it. And like I said, that those movies ended up making 4 or 5 volumes up until the early 90s, I believe it was. It was horrible, horrible stuff. And there was not a scare factor at all in those things. They were camp. They were pure camp. I remember those movies vividly. They were bad effects. The stories were, if you can call them that, just bad all around. And, you know, you just had that kind of thing going on. But as far as these franchises go, um, Jason and Freddy and one or two others actually set the theme. And even Ramiro's 1980s extension stories of the Night of the Living Dead with Dawn of the Dead, the Night of the Living Dead reboot with modern effects. Then you had, what was it, Day of the Dead, that was rebooted back in 2005 with a really, really, pardon the pun, killer film. I love that version. Um, I really dug those films a lot. Even the reboots, the 80s reboots of the Night of the Living Dead stuff, I was a huge fan of that stuff. And you have, of course, today, The Walking Dead, which has some of the best zombie effects ever, which I'm all for. But it just isn't, it's still, other than a couple of cases, I mean, we just don't have that kind of thrill anymore. Insidious, that movie series is getting really close with the thrill factor, but it's still not as in your face impact level as the old slasher movies like Jason here and Freddy and a couple of others. Scream got really good there for a while, but then the follow-up sequels, the fourth or fifth movie got a little cheesy, and they ran that cycle out. But the first one was phenomenal. It was a really close original prospect, which came out really, really cool. And I'm a fan of that film. That's why I'm doing this card today. I really love this first film. The sequel was really interesting, but the college sequel. But then it got into the third and fourth film, and it got a little weird. So it was like they were making them for cable, trying to fill up, ride the franchise kind of thing. And I'm a fan of Neve Campbell, so that's really, really hard to say, because I think she's cool. I think she's a great actress, and she does a lot of work outside of film that is really interesting. So that's hard to say, but it is what it is for what it is. You know what I'm saying? It is what it is for what it is. There's the sound of death. I gave up. Never surrender. But yeah. Now I'm going with the version here of Jason where it was later, where he had his eye put out, and that's why he doesn't have an eyeball. We're going with that rendition. And when I laid this out, I was like really cool with it. But then I was like, dang it, I put the side with no eye, so he can't be all creepy with the eye. But we're going to run with it nonetheless, because I like it. Got the whole rotted flesh thing going on down there and whatnot. So we're good to go. But, oh yeah, I was going to put something up here around his nugget up here to show off a little bit of that macabre looking flesh, as it were. And I don't know if you guys saw the B and B, C, and D type of movies. Did you guys watch those with like Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, when she used to be on like Saturday nights, Friday or Saturday night, and she would show those old campy 60s movies, 50s, 60s, and 70s movies like I was talking about, like Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, Return of the Blob, just whatever, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, all three versions of it. It was really cool stuff. I loved those films because there's a lot of movies in there that don't get that kind of a push, and then there was Vincent Price in the Omega Man, I think it was, where he was the last man on Earth. That was pretty cool. It had been taken over by zombies, and he was the last man on Earth. Charleston Heston redid that, and then Mark DeCostas from oh good Lord, Only the Strong. He played in Double Dragon. I think he played in Stairway to Heaven, the Crow series. for a little while. He even played the nephew of the guy, the American spinoff for Iron Chef America on the Food Network for a while. So, when he bites into a bell pepper or something, it's pretty funny. But, yeah, Mark DaCosta's played in it on a cable version for Sci-Fi, I think it was. But, yeah, that's an interesting film to see go on. Now I'm going to have to ink this and clean it up. So I will start that right now, matter of fact. Oh, where's my 5? There it is. Yeah, they are awesome, man. I definitely love horror movies. I've always got something playing in the background. I'm going to go ink right over this. I'm not even going to play around with it. I'm just going to ink right over it. Now, if you're doing these cards, if you're doing cards or comics, don't do this. Do what I say, not what I do, because of the fact that if you do this, it'll suck up all the ink and it'll still smudge if you're not careful. If you don't use high quality stuff. But what I'll do is I'll go back over and black that off with permanent inks with a larger pen or a brush before I call it a day. I'm just inking straight to this so I can ink it, so I can clean it up once I'm done. But I'm going to ink this one right here for you guys right now and hang out a couple more minutes or so and do a little bit of this, and then I'll get off here and call it a day. But yeah, it's one of those things. I think you're either into horror or you're not. A friend of mine showed me one of his cards that he did of a gesture for a character for a card, and freaked me out because he didn't realize I have a thing. I hate clowns, and that's due to bad experiences with them. But yeah, love Bozo, love that guy, but clowns in general creep me out, especially antique clowns, rodeo clowns, that type of thing. The old hobo type clowns, they bother me to no end. And the reason is because of the fact that I've had bad experiences with those things, which I won't go into. But yeah, everybody's got something they dislike. But I don't go into haunted houses either, and I mentioned that on here before. I just have a real jumpy personality, and with my law enforcement training and my martial arts background, I don't do that very much because of the fact that I would feel awful if I hurt some kid just trying to do their job. That wouldn't be fun at all. But other than that, though, I love this stuff, and I'm addicted to it. And because this is a card, I'm going to get the good old Sharpie, and I'm going to lay this down real quick so I can save some time here. But, yep. And by the way, if you're doing professional inks, don't use a Sharpie. Use a brush or a pen and do it right. They have Copic pen tips. They have Prismacolors. They have Copics. They have all kinds of stuff where you can get really, really nice coverage without using a Sharpie, which will turn rust color red after it oxidizes. So don't do that. I can do that on this because it's going to go somewhere and it'll be framed. So, but hopefully someone will have this card in their possession soon and frame it up and keep it if they want to. If not, you can put it on the wall and throw darts at it. I don't know. Whatever you want to do. But yep. We're going to ink this up real quick. Got news on the course. Got the bonus footage. I'm filming. I was going to film it today, but due to a mishap, I did not get to. I had to finish up some other stuff, but I'm going to get that on the schedule for tomorrow, and I'm going to be posting that up very, very soon. The 15th's rolling up on me soon, and I've got a ton of stuff coming out, and I want you guys to be ready for it. Not that I'm trying to pre-sell you on it or anything. I'm just saying for sake of saying, it's going to be awesome stuff. And I hope that you guys will be around for that. And I'm going to share a bunch of nifty knowledge for you. That's going to be cool. Moving off the off to the comic rails for actual page work and showing off some techniques and tactics and whatnot on how to get your book out there as well, so that you can promote it, so that you can get it done and released, and if you want to sell it. So I had one guy tell me that he was just creating comic characters just to sell, and he doesn't understand. I tried to warn him. He doesn't understand the concept that, they don't buy just comic book characters. You have to have a book and a following and a success rate for that stuff already. When Fabian and Rob Liefeld came up with, they created Deadpool, and, they don't just buy characters offhand. You have to be an elitist to be able to make characters for Marvel and things like that, and he thinks that he's going to be able to submit those for Marvel. That was an interesting discussion, but and no, I'm not going to throw him under the bus, so I don't believe in that, but yeah, that made for an interesting conversation. We're going to talk about how to create characters and how to produce comic books and monetize those characters if that's what you want to do, or get them out there to show off as properties so that you can get other work if that's what you want to do. And I'm going to show you some of the best tactics that I use to do that. So yeah, if you're game for it, cool. And you might actually be able to draw something too. You never know. Might get to draw something. But yep, this card is coming along swimmingly. I normally don't ink these this on session, this way on session type of thing, but in this particular case, I just wanted to throw this one down because I wanted it to look good and done real quick for you guys. And I've been doing this so long that it just comes second nature and cleans up really quick. And a lot of people ask me all the time, why don't you ink on cam? Well, I don't talk as much because this is a finishing thing for me. So I'm in the zone for just kicking it out and getting it finished up, because as you can tell, it's coming along really quick. And I mean, this is a small surface and there's not much to it, but still, for the most part, we're getting it all inked up and done here fairly quickly. And I like to do this. See, inking for me is easy because the work's already done, so I just have to frame it out and go for it. And when you're inking, don't go back and forth too much. Build it up, build it up, line, line, line. Don't go back and forth over what you've already done so far, because that's the point. Because see, what I'm doing is I'm looping around. There's an outside line, an inside line, and if it's a double pass, cool. If it's a triple pass to fill in the center, that's cool too. But for the most part, don't go back over your lines too much, because if you do, you'll make them bleed and you'll saturate them to death. And you'll get a super thick line, because I'm going over this one, barely touching the tip. And this is a 0.5 right here. But what I'm doing is barely laying thin lines and then going back over it and building it up so they're smooth. Because if you don't, you're going to chop it up and it's going to get rippled and wavy and it's going to look weird. Don't do that. But I make each individual line kind of like a box, where I go over the outside and then go back in and fill it 1 or 2 passes, as long as that takes, and then it's done. But if you start rippling out, you'll make a mess. And it's kind of got a tattooing effect to it. That's what it's been related to the most. It's, you know, it's like, you're outlining for a tattoo, man. No, I don't have a steady hand for that. But I mean, if it's similar, then that's cool. I've been referenced to that a couple of times. And it's one of those things. It's a cool deal. I used to do a lot of tattoo designs, so I know how the line works for that, but I don't have steady enough hands to put something permanently on someone's skin in that form or manner. It's just like, no, if you want me to design you something and you want to have someone of quality skill put it on there, awesome, but I'll stick with paper and comic art, thank you very much. Well, I'd really like you to do it because you're the artist. No. I just don't want to be drawing on people's flesh. I mean, if you give me a Sharpie and let me go at it, that might be something, but I'd really rather not go somebody with a needle and ink, you know. I just don't have that constitution in place to trust myself with carving that into someone's flesh that way. However, I am very appreciative and supportive of people that do, because it's an amazing craft. It really, really is. It's an amazing craft. But for me, I'm like, that's permanent. So whatever. And if I mess somebody up, you know, if I hit a blowout, or, you know, if I was to scar them or break skin or cut them, you know, or just simply screw it up, I would feel just horrible with that, and I wouldn't want that on my conscience. Because there's some people out there that are way more talented at that than I am. I've seen a lot of people try to do the crossover thing, and it's just like, really? You know? No, it's just, it's kind of disrespectful, in my opinion. Watching, you know, not tattoo artists doing artwork for you, like this, sketch art is one thing. But an artist going in cold and saying that they can tattoo, and then putting, you know, needle to flesh without proper training and conditioning for that, I just think that's disrespectful. But that's my personal opinion too, though, because I know people in the field, and that's just not something you do. But, and I actually thought about doing that one point, crossing over, you know, taking an apprenticeship and crossing over, but I was just like, nah, it's just not me. I've had a couple of people want a couple of these cards to go as tattoos for themselves, and I was just like, well, go for it if that's what you want to do. But please don't put my signature on your butt, you know, because I sign some of the cards in hidden places sometimes, and it's just like, please don't use one with a signature on it. I don't want my name on your butt. So, but all joking aside, though, it's actually an honor that someone would see a piece of art that any artist would do and want that on their person that way. Pretty cool. But anyway, I digress for the sake of a laugh, but that's all right. I'm going to thicken this up a little bit on this side because it's his face. Just want to put a little mark for that flesh there on the side, which I didn't pencil in originally. Now I'm outlining these holes in the mask here so that I can go in and black them out. And then I'm going to call it a day, and I'll finish this up offline because of the fact that I don't want to keep you guys dangling along with that. I want to get back to working for this comic getting done and getting you guys some stuff going on. And I so appreciate you hanging out with me. But yeah. Hey, Mr. Jim, Alexandra, thank you for making it. I appreciate you guys stopping by and sharing some time with me. You know, I was listening to one of my mentors today, and Alan Weiss. And if you don't know the guy, he's a best-selling author and speaker, and he's a phenomenal mentor to have. Dude's awesome, and he doesn't take praise very well though, because he considers himself a disruption speaker, and that's the phrase that I coined for him. Is the fact that I ran that over. That happens. Live drawing. I'll have to clean that up now. But anyway, he's one of those guys that see, I don't mind making mistakes. It's cool. But he's one of those guys that talks about wanting to provoke people. And one of the things that he says is most important, which resonates with me every time he says it, is the fact that, walk to the beat of your own drum and be different. And I love that. Love that. If you're a comic artist, or any artist for that matter, make your voice known, and don't go for the praise. Go for the creation. Don't make it about what's going to happen with the, your 5-star rating, your, 20,000 reviews or likes or whatever. I mean, that's a good thing for the business side of it, to meter that. But in reality, when it comes down to it, don't let people judge your artwork. Don't let them change your voice. And that's the prominent thing that I wanted to point out there. Just like this right here, I'll hear, when I post this, I'll probably hear, I don't know, 50 or 60 random haters right off the bat saying, man, it doesn't look like Jason. It's not realistic. It's not photorealistic. It's not this, that, and the other, and I'll hear all that whining. But those 50 or 60 people don't make me change my style at all. If my style resonates with you and you like it, it's awesome. If it doesn't, that's awesome too, because that means you're still hunting for the beat to your drum. And I have no qualms about that. Go find it. But if you want to keep hanging out, you're going to have to get to like this sound too, and be open to more than one type of music, or type of style, or type of flow, because that's what we've got going on here. But if you're a young artist out there and you're checking this out, thank you very much. If you're an old artist like that, thank you very much, because I know you have less time to spend on it. So it's just one of those things. Find your voice. I get asked all the time about style, and it's just like, what? It's just the way I draw. Well, what about changing this, and what about doing that? No. I don't go into your house and tell you what orange juice to buy. No, don't do that. If you want my 2 cents on it, I'll give you my 2 cents on it, but don't go throw down a quarter and give me advice I didn't ask for. You know what I mean? And that's part of the thing that I see in marketing every day too. When I'm consulting people, they're like, well, I paid you to give me this answer. Well, no, you didn't. You paid me to give you my advice and a different approach and different suggestions. I give you options. I don't give you answers. There's a difference. Only you can pick the answers and options to what you do. But somebody has to suggest those options to give you a different perspective. Same thing with your artwork, do you. Don't worry about the rest of it. It'll all work out. Don't let anybody tell you different. I tell my kid all the time, just like I tell my students and my consulting clients, everybody, do your thing. Don't let anybody tell you different, because if you do that, you're going to entertain yourself, and the world is going to follow suit because there's like-minded people like you. Because if you got one friend in the world, then that's proof that you are liked and your sense of humor and style resonate with people. That's all it takes. And then you just stack it one friend at a time, one fan at a time, one page at a time, one book at a time. Think about it. Food for thought for a starving mind. There you go. That's the way to do it. Now, I know I'm going over this with my 5 here, and I should be just blacking that sucker out and getting it going. So that's what we're going to do. Because like I said, I was going to keep it going, and then, yay! So, and I thought I was going to go ahead and cut off of this, but I'm not. I'm going to go ahead and finish this, because now I'm so close, it's just one of those things. I'm going to finish out the sprigs of hair here. And the reason I do them cartoony and veiny like this is because of the fact that I do them as patches of hair and not as a single thread, but like clusters kind of thing right here where they match up and whatnot. And I'll go in and carve in those lines real quick. Tiny little lines. Make them crinkle and crunch because the hair's dried up and old and waterlogged and rotted and then wet again and dried again and burnt and blown up, whatever else he's been through. So I'm going to go ahead and do that corner real quick. Well, we're almost done with this card now. And then I'll have to color it up, of course, for I'll let the ink dry and I'll color it up and get it all nice and clean and whatnot, and we'll put it in the collection. But you guys are awesome, man. I mean, I appreciate this more than you know. You guys coming back and hanging out with me day after day. You realize we've been doing this for 5 months now, right? I mean, I know I've said that a couple of times in the last couple of days, but literally 5 months. It's a long time for people to be checking you out and watching your stuff every single day, and that's just phenomenal. I mean, I never get less than 30 hits, which is crazy. And then by morning, I normally have 50 to 70. And then by the end of the week, I normally have a couple hundred, which I know that doesn't sound like much, but those are routine people like you guys coming back to watch me every single day. And that shows the love for the community and the craft, and that's what I'm always talking about, and that's what I appreciate the most. I know how important that is to have, whether people think that they're, you know, that watchers and viewers and stuff matter no matter what. I tell you, no, it's very important. Very, very important. But anyway, there we go. Jason and the Ghost Mask from Scream. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I'm out of here. See you tomorrow. Don't know what I'm going to bring under the table yet, but we'll go from there. Thanks.